User Tatum, thanks for sharing. Is it true that there are oil paints where you don't use toxic solvents? Yeah, so when it comes to the composition of oil paints, you have inside a tube of oil paint, you typically have 3 different kinds of ingredients, and I'll just show you by way of example. So something like this is a Gamblin paint. This is a company out of Portland, Oregon, and inside this tube of paint, you would have 3 different things. Number 1, you have the pigment. The pigment is a rock that has been ground down into a powder. That rock or mineral can be anything from titanium, like titanium white, or chromium. You have to refer back to your chemistry, grade 12 chemistry. Chromium is also another element, like chromium oxide, green. Cobalt, cadmium. There are a lot of different kinds of chemicals. Lapis lazuli is a mineral. It's ground down into a powder. That powder is suspended into what's called a binder. And it's just a liquid that the powder sits in. And the binder in oil paint is oil. It's linseed oil. It doesn't need to be linseed, which is from the flax plant. It doesn't have to be linseed. It could be walnut oil. It could be sunflower oil. It can even be coconut oil. There are a lot of different kinds of oil that you can make oil paint with, but usually it's linseed oil from the flax plant. So that's 2 things: the pigment, the powder, which gives it the color, the oil that is suspended in, and then the 3rd thing is called a filler. The filler is typically one of 4 things: chalk, talc. Talc is just a very soft component. Wax, or calcium carbonate. All 4 of those things have 2 effects. Number 1, they increase the, maybe not increase, but they change the consistency of the paint. But all of them also do another thing, is that they decrease the cost of the paint, because the pigment and the binder are very expensive. So if you can put a bunch of wax or a bunch of chalk inside the paint, it does make it less expensive. So those are the 3 things in paint. And there are a few paints, however, few paint companies, Michael Harding and Old Holland, that don't use any binder. That's only pigment and oil paint and oil. So there's no chalk or talc or calcium carbonate or wax in these 2 brands, Michael Harding and Old Holland. So that's what's in paint. Now, to your question, are there oil paints you don't have to use toxic solvents? So that's what's in the paint. And sometimes the pigments themselves, the things that give the oil its color, are toxic, like cadmium red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, etc., is slightly radioactive. What else? Genuine Chinese vermilion. Vermilion is made out of the substance that, when refined, becomes mercury. That's extraordinarily toxic if ingested. Cremants white is made with lead, extraordinarily toxic. So it doesn't matter what solvent you use, the paint itself is toxic. There's a lot of toxic paint. There's some Naples yellow that's very toxic. There's a lot of paint that's not toxic. You have to be careful, and that's just up to each individual paint. In terms of the solvent, turpentine, which is used with paint, is toxic, but there are many non-toxic alternatives to turpentine, including terpenoid and also odorless mineral spirits. You can use both of those, are non-toxic.